Hello everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. In the last episode, we found that Princess Margaret discovered happiness in marriage with Antony Armstrong Jones, and everyone was happy with her marriage after what she went through with Peter Townsend. The Queen Mother was fond of Antony and remained friends with him till the end of her life. Next was the social revolution of the 1960s caused by people becoming richer and able to afford TVs, refrigerators, and cars. And TV had people expanding their knowledge, and it had them questioning ancient institutions. The royal family was feeling uncomfortable. They shouldn't have, though. They were still well loved by the people, and the polls showed that they felt the royal family was a buffer of sorts against total government control. Then we saw the Queen Mother and all her royal patronages that would make the younger generation tired trying to duplicate it. So let's see what's going on today. Queen Elizabeth found that one decade glided into another. Her days, weeks, months, and years were constant most of the time. What happened in 1963 could have been repeated in 1983 or 1993, with a cast of characters much the same, just older. She still got pleasure from P.G. Wodehouse. She went to Sandown Park, from the Black Watch to the Middle Temple, from her corgis to the Royal Yacht Britannia. Each year she spent Christmas with the royal family. Time was spent either at Sandringham or Windsor until 1988, when the family reverted to spending Christmas at Sandringham. They spent the New Year there, and unless she wasn't feeling well, in which case the Queen would take her place, Queen Elizabeth never missed her first fixture there in January, at the annual general meeting of the Sandringham Women's Institute. She visited the studs at Sandringham and Wolverton, and at least twice a week during her stay. Every year, February the 6th, the anniversary of the King's death, she took communion, usually with other members of the family. In later years, she would spend this day at Royal Lodge. For most of the second half of the winter and the early spring, she would be based at Clarence House with weekends at Royal Lodge. Easter was always with the family at Windsor, and in May she would make her first visit of the year to Scotland. In 1960, she bought the neighboring Longall farm to pursue her growing interest in breeding Aberdeen Angus cattle and North Country Cheval sheep. Then she went to Birkhall in May, and she invited friends to stay for fishing. Then she would return south. Summer's annual events included the Derby, Trooping the Colour on Horse Guards Parade, the Garter Service at Windsor, and Royal Ascot. In July, she went back to Norfolk for the King's Lynn Festival and Sandringham Flower Show. After her birthday on the August 4th, she would go to May for a longer holiday, and then a weekend with the Queen and other members of the family at Balmoral, after which she would move down the road to her home. And then it was back to London and Royal Lodge until Christmas. Within this fairly well-fixed timetable, there were many events that were ring-fenced on both private and public sides of her life. There were regular engagements included in March, the annual general meeting of Queen Mary's London Needlework Guild at St. James Palace, and she attended this every year until 2001. A favorite fixture was dinner with the members of the Garden Society for an evening of horticultural talk. And every year, until she ceased to be Chancellor in 1980, there were the University of London graduation ceremonies at Royal Albert Hall. She attended the ballet or opera. The Royal Variety performance was also a regular engagement until 1988. Then there was the Royal College of Music's annual prize giving in concert, which she attended from 1952 until 1992, when she retired as president and was elected president emerita, and the Middle Temple Family Night Dinner every December. The First World War never left the Queen Mother's mind, and she made sure in November she planted her personal cross of remembrance in the Field of Remembrance at St. Margaret's Church, Westminster, attended the Royal British Legion Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall, and watched from the Remembrance Day ceremony at the scene of Taft from the Home Office balcony. So as you can see, she was a very busy lady, and most years she carried out around 100 official engagements, occasionally more. Many more, usually about 200, had to be refused every year. Most years included at least one official overseas visit. The Queen Mother's greatest pleasure was her family. She and the Queen talked to each other almost every day on the telephone, if not in person. The Buckingham Palace switchboard operator, in putting through the call, would say, "Your Majesty, I have Your Majesty on the line." And when they were not talking of their shared obsession with horses and racing, family matters dominated the conversations. Queen Elizabeth took a keen interest in her grandchildren, particularly Prince Charles. They had a close bond that started when his parents were on a long Commonwealth tour in 1953 to 1954, and it grew stronger as the years passed. In 1961, while his parents were in India, Queen Elizabeth visited the 12-year-old prince at his preparatory school, Chem, in Surrey. He was suffering from a bad attack of measles and came home to Royal Lodge to get well. He soon recovered, much to his disappointment, said his grandmother, and she took him with her to Buckingham Palace for Prince Andrew's first birthday party. Afterwards, writing to the Queen, she reported that Andrew looked absolutely angelic. The noise was terrific, and everyone enjoyed themselves very much. The cake was cut with great difficulty by Andrew, and the proceedings ended by me escaping about 5:30. Later that year, when the Queen was on a visit to Ghana, the Queen Mother took Princess Anne to Chem to see Prince Charles's school play, and wrote to tell the Queen about it afterwards. She was not allowed to mingle with the other parents, she said, but was firmly segregated in another room where she was given boiling sherry. She said the play was an adaptation of Richard III. The Queen described the scene after a few minutes on the stage. Shambled a most horrible-looking creature, a leering vulgarian with a dreadful expression on his twisted mouth, and to my horror, I began to realize that this was my dear grandson. He was the Duke of Gloucester and acted his part very well. In fact, he made the part quite revolting. The headmaster told Queen Elizabeth that he was pleased with the young prince's progress. The family at this time was discussing where Prince Charles should be educated next. Prince Philip wanted him to go to his own school, Gordonstone, in northeastern Scotland. He thought it would suit the prince best, and that its remoteness would protect him somewhat from the intrusions of the media. It was far from London, and the school was in easy reach of Balmoral and Birkhall. The Queen Mother wanted him to go to Eton, where her brothers and many of her friends had been educated. The Queen Mother knew her grandson was sensitive and even vulnerable, and she thought Eton would be by far the best place for him. Moreover, the school was just across the River Thames from Windsor Castle, and many of the sons of his parents would be there. At Gordonstone, by contrast, he might as well be at school abroad. It would be an alien world in which he would be terribly alone and cut off. Prince Philip's views prevailed. On family matters, the Queen almost always deferred to her husband's judgment, conscious that although she was a queen, he was the head of the family. Queen Elizabeth was tactful, but she was dismayed by Prince Philip's choice. She was right. Prince Charles was unhappy and felt isolated at Gordonstone. She did all she could to aid and comfort him at what she called, in one letter, that glorious, subreptitious bed of roses known as Gordonstown, and he visited her often at Birkhall. After one weekend there, he wrote, "All the way back in the car, I kept wanting to go back and stay longer at Birkhall." He listed all the times in the week at which he was allowed to receive telephone calls. She urged members of the family to telephone him to cheer him up. He was a brave little boy, she said. The prince's dislike of Gordonstone did not ease as he grew older. She thoroughly approved of his ultimate educational destination, Trinity College, Cambridge, where the former conservative politician Rab Butler was master. She gave Prince Charles a painting by Edward Seago for his room in the college. The last grandchild was completed by the birth of the Queen and Prince Philip's fourth and last child, Prince Edward, born in 1964. Two children of Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon, Lord David Lindley, 1961, and Lady Sarah Armstrong Jones, 1964. The Queen Mother played an important role in the lives of these last two grandchildren. They spent a great deal of time at her homes, particularly in the 1970s, and they too came to love her deeply, as did their aunt, the Queen. There were happy times, but also sad times as well, in the 1960s. The first thing that happened was the death of Arthur Penn, her oldest and most devoted friend and courtier. His last months of service to her, she still had not released him completely, were spoiled when in May 1960, the British press picked up on a report in an American newspaper that Queen Elizabeth was about to marry him. Queen Elizabeth was in northern Rhodesia when the story broke, and her office dismissed it as complete and absolute nonsense. The Queen said she took it in very good part, but Penn was mortified by what he called this most embarrassing absurdity. He felt that having successfully avoided any publicity through 25 years of royal service, this reversal has been most odious. He became frail, and by the end of November 1960, he wrote to the Queen Elizabeth in a shaky hand that the medicine men could not succeed in stabilizing him. He felt he had to be patient and count his very numerous blessings. But I wish I could be with your majesty and be of some service to you. He died December 31st that year. Queen Elizabeth was greatly saddened and wrote to his sister saying that to be able to turn to Arthur for wise counsel in so many different situations, to be able to share the pleasure of beautiful things and to laugh was something that has meant more to me than I can ever say, both in happy days and sad days. How wonderful to have lived a life such as Arthur lived, spreading gaiety and kindness around him, and goodness and courage as well. After Penn died, Queen Elizabeth's sister May Elphinstone died February 1961 at the age of 77. Her daughter affectionately remembered her mother as permanently in an old tweed coat, tied around the waist and with a piece of string and gumboots, bent double over something in the garden. She had a strong social conscience and worked in the slums of Edinburgh and in women's voluntary service during the war. Later in 1961, Queen Elizabeth's younger brother David died suddenly. He still lived at St. Paul's Walden with his wife Rachel and son Simon. Not everyone found David Bowes-Lyon easy, but the brother and sister were devoted to each other. September the 12th, he had a heart attack, and he died the next day. The Queen Mother's daughter, Queen Elizabeth, knew what a gap this would leave in her mother's life and did her best to cherish her in these days, for which the Queen wrote to thank her and say how devoted David had been to his niece, too. He really loved you and would have done anything for you. He was one of the few people upon he could rely on to tell her the truth, and his death was like a light going out in one's life. We have always been so close. I knew what he was thinking even. Soon after the funeral, Queen Elizabeth went up to the Castle May. Relaxing there made her feel calmer, but she continued to find life bleak without the other Benjamin. Her last surviving sibling, Rose, Lady Granville, died November 1967. Queen Elizabeth had visited her twice earlier that year at her home in Scotland. Rose was not only thought to be the great beauty in the family, she was much loved for her kindness. I will stop the video here. In this episode, I got exhausted seeing how busy the Queen Mother was with her calendar of events that she had through the years. The calendar of events stayed the same, but she was also determined to be with her family. She spent holidays with them, and she also loved being with her grandchildren, especially Prince Charles. The 1960s were a time when the Queen would lose people she was close to. That wasn't easy, but her daughter always made sure she was cherished and looked after. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would greatly help the channel to continue growing. And as I mentioned before, I have created a list of merchandise from Amazon that I thought you might be interested in. And if you click on the link, it takes you to the Amazon page. If you purchase anything, I get a small commission that is of no extra cost to you. But more importantly, I wish everybody a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.